you haven't seen the shop, so the shop is in there, and copies of the book are available on sale in there. Bridget will assist you. And Dr. Miranda, I've got it here, a curious doctor that has chosen to impact health of communities as opposed to treating one's patient at a time. I found that very interesting, and I hope
I committed to this book launch way before it was written, so I couldn't back out of it. I committed to this book without knowing what the content of the book is, and then can't remember when Vangile sent me a copy. I had the book for about 5 weeks, kept putting it down, kept going to the bathroom, and it started my journey on the book. Yeah?
Okay. You guys will find out why I wrote the book, right? Not just from asking the questions. But my name is Vangile Makwakwa. I help women of color heal ancestral money traumas so they can fall in love with their bank accounts, increase income, and live their best lives. So, my journey of writing this book has been a lot. I say that I wrote this book during the darkest night of my life. And it was a very public dark night, right? And all I wanted was to just write this book. But the book actually started in 2020 during COVID. One morning I woke up and I just started downloading these money archetypes and profiles. And it just came, and I just knew I could relate to each and every client. I could just think to myself, this is the client, this client, this client, this client. I've been coaching clients for years. And suddenly something just kind of like went off in my brain, and I just knew exactly what profiles my clients were in. Started to deeply understand after years of coaching hundreds, if not thousands of women, what it is that we're struggling with within our families and the family dynamics, right? So a big part of this book has been around understanding family dynamics. So the journey of writing this book was really, I guess, without even knowing it, looking at my clients, making the decisions that we're making, right? So that's the process of writing the book. And then as I was doing everything, I did case studies with clients. So each and every archetype has a case study. You'll be able to read the journeys of some of those clients, and it wasn't really difficult. I did little blips. I didn't give them anything about the book. Like Mizo says, I didn't talk to anyone about the book, not my family, not anyone, because I was like, oh my God, no, let me just write this book. And I started doing case studies, and as I was doing the case studies and asking questions, it reconfirmed for me that actually I'm right about these archetypes, you know. And now as people are reading the book, like Mizo, she's been like sending me voice notes and messages, you know, this is my aunt, this is so-and-so, this is me, man, this is me, you know. So it's been really, really interesting. And I hope that you guys will also resonate with the book, and that if you have read the book, you're starting to see yourself in the archetypes.
In 2017, September, I will remember this because I ended up in hospital then. So we met in 2017. I had known you for a year, and we met at the stretch school, the stretch school. But physically, first time I met you was in 2017 at the Apartheid Museum, and you were going around the room to ask people, why did you come to the money workshop that you had with Nebo?
Yeah.
And my first thing that came to mind was, I have worked, and I think I've been a millionaire many times over, but the million doesn't show. And my millions are not in the bank, my millions are not in the car that I drive, my millions are not in the house that I live in. Where are the millions going, right? And that is my money frustration. And that was my first question to you. And just let everyone know, why? Why is my frustration like that? Why am I a millionaire times over, but not? Yeah?
No, I wish I was joking, but
Yeah.
as a doctor, she was told that there was nothing wrong with her when she went to hospital. It was just me. I just triggered her very deeply. So just this is to say, in case you are triggered, drink water, sleep, meditate. But should we talk about your fixer profile?
Let's talk about that. I know so much, right? You know I'm educated. You know I've got
Okay, let's not start with the profile thing. Okay,
you know
so
I've got 2 postgrad degrees, right? So why am I not clever enough with money?
okay, that is the right question then. Okay, 'cause I think that is a very, very good question because everyone always says to me, oh yeah, your work is actually meant for people that have not gone to school, don't have matric, don't have degrees. And I'm always like to these corporates, and why are all my clients doctors, nurses, engineers, PhDs, psychologists and therapists, if that's the case, right? And why me too? Why have I struggled so deeply with money having an MBA, right? I did a finance honors degree at UCT. So why did I also struggle with money? Why is it a thing for me? And basically, in a nutshell, it's because money has nothing to do with intelligence. I mean, it has some, but not really. If you look across the board in this world, there are people in every industry who are making millions, and there are people in every industry who are not making millions. There are cleaners who have somehow cracked the code on how to make lots of money cleaning, and there are doctors who have cracked the code making lots of money being in medicine, and it's the same everywhere. So why is the spectrum? Because what we don't talk about is the trauma aspect of money, right? Is that it doesn't matter how well educated you are, if every time you are coming into contact with money, you are triggered, and then you are behaving with money from the triggered state of your 4-year-old self or your 16-year-old self, then you've got a child running your finances. You, a fully grown adult, is probably being hijacked, which I talk a lot about the idea of being hijacked in the book, right? You're being hijacked by the traumatized part of you. So I think the best thing is to give an example. In the book, I share an example about how as soon as I graduated with my MBA, I started having panic attacks with money, right? And I couldn't even withdraw money from an ATM. I would go to the ATM and I would have a panic attack. I would go buy milk, I would go buy bread, and I would have a panic attack every time I had to manage money, right? And people would be like, oh, but on the outside, I was everything. I was ticking all the boxes. I was living in Boston, Massachusetts, in the US. I was going to the right events. I'd gone to an incredible business school. I studied at UCT. So why was I having these panic attacks? And why is it that every time I would make money, I would get rid of money as fast as I made it, you know? And here's another interesting thing. Just like Lizo, at the time, I had a job working for the Saudi royal family as a tutor. I was making $8,000 US a month, working only 40 hours a month, by the way. And I was making $8,000 US. But I was $60,000 in debt, unable to pay for my debt. I couldn't tell you what happened to that $8,000 every month. I was struggling. I was sleeping on friends' couches, making that amount of money. I couldn't buy myself toiletries. I just did not know where the money was going. It was going as fast as possible. And honest to God, I thought it was witchcraft, right? Because I mean, what is this explanation, you know? Until I started to understand that actually, I was just repeating a pattern that I had seen growing up. My uncle was the exact same way, my mom's brother. He came back from exile. My uncle studied in then East Germany. He spoke German, he spoke Swahili, he spoke Nyanja, he spoke Bemba. He lived in Tanzania, Zambia, all over the world, right? He was extremely well educated. He was actually one of the chess masters in Germany when he was living there. So it wasn't because of intelligence that my uncle was like that, but every time my uncle got paid, we would, within 7 days, have no money, and he would be asking for money from my grandmother, who was a pensioner, to help him. and he was working, he was like one of the top directors at what was then Sportnet and is now Transnet, right? I was just following in the same footsteps. What I had learned as a child was that money is not safe, and that one way to feel safe with money was to get rid of it so that I can get back to my state of safety. So without even understanding it, as children, we are co-regulating, which means we are matching up and syncing up to our caregivers' nervous systems. They don't have to say anything. They can be smiling, happy, whatever. But as children, we are syncing up to our caregivers' nervous systems and co-regulating to them. So what my nervous system learned was that when an adult has money in that moment, they feel safe, they feel unsafe. So my nervous system learned that having money equals unsafety. So I need to feel unsafe with money. But what my nervous system saw is the way that you get, or what my inner child saw rather, not my nervous system, but what I saw as a child was, how do you then get back to baseline without feeling anxious and scared? You get rid of the thing that makes you feel unsafe, that makes you feel anxious. So you get rid of money as fast as possible. So every time I had money, I would get rid of money. So Mizo, you learned from a young age how to behave with money, right? You saw the adults around you, and there's a part of you that learned how to get rid of money because money wasn't safe. Having more than enough money wasn't safe, making more wasn't safe, which is why I know for both of us, expansion is so scary. We freak out every time we have to expand, every time we have to do big business deals. It doesn't feel safe in the nervous system. It feels scary, it feels triggering, and these are the things that we don't talk about. Everyone is often talking about how we need to budget more, but what do you do when actually having more money doesn't feel safe? When expansion does not feel safe on a physical level, on a nervous system level, and you've never had expansion modeled to you. We don't do that. Right? We just don't.
What
not
do
for
destroyers
long.
do?
We would do that, but we'll give you a year maybe of helping you. Even a year is too long, I feel.
Yeah.
Like maybe a few months, and then we'll be like, we'll start complaining, and then we'll let it be known. But yeah, so the profile and the archetype that she's talking about is the fixer archetype, right? There are two archetypes that are more likely to do that, the profiles. The sweet one, a profile, and a fixer profile. So Mizo, it just described the fixer profile. A huge part of that is, let me just explain how the profiles come to be, which I talk about in the book more in depth. But in a nutshell, we all respond to trauma very differently in our lives. There are key ways that we respond to trauma, right? So psychologists talk about fight, flight, fawn, freeze, and then in the book I introduce a new concept, which is force. That's my whole theory, right? But when you, we've all heard you're in fight or flight mode, right? But you also go into freeze mode. So if, let's say, you are scared and your thing is to bury your head in the sand and freeze, that's one of the things, right? We run away, we do all these things. So the profiles, the actual shadow archetypes are based on the way that we respond to trauma, right? So if you're in flight mode, you are the runaway. That is the way that you mainly learn to respond to trauma, by running away and flying, or flighting, right? If you're in fight mode, you're a destroyer most times. You respond to trauma by going into fight mode and fighting things, right? If you are in force mode, and this is the one that I introduced, you are the fixer. So you try to control everything. And by default, you're trying to control everyone. And we'll come back to what is happening with the fixer and their core wounds. And then if you're in fawn mode, you go into people pleaser mode, right? So you fawn over everyone. You want to make sure that there's no conflict. You're conflict avoidant. So you're fawning, and that's how you learn to deal with everyone. And then when you're in freeze mode, you're the eternal child. The eternal child is stuck in a particular trauma in their lives and in their childhood and their teens, right? So fixers often will get involved in everyone's lives. Who in the family, especially in your black family, has had to deal with the breadwinner who is in everybody's business? You cannot get rid of them. No matter what you do, they will call you. They find you sitting down. They want to know your career plans, your 5-year plans. Every time you talk, you're spending money on a new car. They are the first one to be like, you just spent money on this. Were you not telling me yesterday that you owe so-and-so? Is this not a reckless use of money? They are those people. And then everybody, and then I'm sorry for the fixers who are mainly the breadwinners, right? Because I know your pain, I feel it, right? Because you go on Facebook and on social media and you're screaming to the heavens about how you're supporting everybody, but everybody cannot be grateful, they're unappreciative, they resent you, right? So as a fixer, you have no clue why people resent you, because actually the fixer is born into the family to move everybody forward financially. So a fixer, and I'm sure lots of us have seen this, when a breadwinner passes on in the family, how the family starts to just go down, right? Because the role, each and every archetype has a role. The role of the fixer is that a fixer can actually move a family to the next class system in one generation. They can literally take a family from poverty to upper class, like move several classes up in one generation. But the way in which they do it, very, very violent, especially if they're in their shadow state. They can cause so much trauma in the process, and they do not understand it, because when you look around, they'll be like, we're living in this neighborhood before, and now the entire extended family is living there, but nobody appreciates me. Why is that? So part of that is that the fixer has a core wound of abandonment, right? They fear being left on their own and expanding alone. So they feel that the way that they need to move everyone along is by forcing the family to come on the journey. But the danger of that is that fixers are literally interfering with the roles of the other archetypes, right? Which is why a family with no destroyer will just fix, but you'll be building on trauma, right? A family that has and here's the important thing to note, a fixer has the strongest energy. They are the most strong energetically within the family. Not even a destroyer's energy can match the energy of a fixer, right? So they can literally mobilize everyone, and they need that energy. Karmically, they were born with that energy. You cannot just tap into it. I cannot just wake up and have the energy of a fixer, you know? You're born with it because you have the energy to move people forward, right? But they have zero boundaries. Actually, they have boundaries for themselves. They have no respect for your boundaries, right? And that's a very, very important thing to understand. The fixer is very boundaried for themselves, but they do not respect other people's boundaries, which is why everyone else cannot stand in the family.
I know that feeling.
Like literally, Lizo lands at the airport, I go pick her up, and Tegobato, another one of our friends, and they come to stay with me at my apartment in Chiang Mai, Thailand. So I had this apartment for years, and I kept it as a base in Chiang Mai. And we're traveling to the apartment. I get to the apartment, I'm like, you know what, guys, I think I need to move to Bali. You know, I don't have a plan. I wake up the next morning, I'm talking about Bali. Then I go downstairs to go give in my scooter, because now I'm like really committed to this Bali thing in 24 hours. You know, I'm like, no, it's definitely gonna happen. And then I come back up. This is like I think at 8 a.m. At 8:30, I'm like, guys, we've got to pack up. I've got tenants for my apartment. I'm like, I'm renting it short term. They're moving in at 6 p.m. We have like a few hours. We need to pack and leave. And this is like, what the hell, man? I'm like, it's packing time. We're moving. We're going to the next venue. I've got a place. I'm leaving for Bali, that's it. And by 6 p.m., we had done everything, had packed up, and I had decided, and I was still like, shit, I don't have a flight ticket, you know. I still hadn't bought a flight ticket, but I was like, at least we have a place to stay for a few days. It will sort itself out, and that's how it happened. So
Gorgeous place, by the way, gorgeous place. God, I could go back there any time, but the suddenness of it, and it's not the first time that I watch it. She does that, and then she moves on to the next and the next. But it's an archetype, and in its shadow self, what is that archetype and what does it do? And what does it do to your savings, to your debt, to your response to money? And has it built wealth? Does it build wealth? And why doesn't it build wealth?
So you have seen the evolution of me in this archetype as well, right? So my secondary archetype after the destroyer is the runaway. And the runaway is the free spirit, the nomad. It looks exciting, right? But often the runaway archetype is born out of the flight response of trauma, right? So as a runaway, when things get challenging, get hard, you just leave, right? I was sharing on Thursday that one of the things with the runaway archetype is you learned to escape your body when things got challenging. So most runaway archetypes, you will ask them, do you remember your childhood? They have almost no childhood memories. They can't remember their childhood. They can't remember childhood memories. They can't remember what happened when they were a particular age. Because when the traumatic incidents were taking place, they were dissociating from the body. They were leaving their bodies, right? And so as adults, they learned to run away. So if they can leave, they will travel, they will move away from home as fast as possible. If they cannot, and this is one of the saddest things, they may run to drugs and alcohol to continue to disconnect and leave the body. And as you can imagine, the impact of that is that you learn to deal with challenges by running away from your challenges, right? This is how I started traveling. It was, home is too challenging, the trauma of staying at home, my relationship with my mom is just too chaotic, I can't deal with this, so let me just leave the country and keep traveling, right? Until, thankfully, and I say thankfully, I started having panic attacks with money. I could no longer escape myself, right? And this is what often happens with a lot of runaways. Your body will start exhibiting certain symptoms that force you to come into your body, you know? So you may run away from relationships. You don't stick. When it gets hard in a relationship, you're on to the next one. You leave. And you may even pride yourself on that, not realizing that it's a trauma, but you never ever learn to work through things. So with my panic attacks and my suicidal ideation and my deep depression, it forced me to come into my body, to get into my body, to start facing myself. And that was the one thing that I couldn't run away from, right? Myself, my own body. I had spent so much time dissociating, always in a club, doing exciting things in certain countries so that I'm never in my own body. So that is one of the things. And the way that it impacts your finances, you can imagine. When things got hard for me, doesn't matter if I accumulated debt in South Africa. When I got debt in South Africa, I just moved. I moved to the US. I never had to deal with anything. I was never accountable for anything, right? When I got debt in the US and my credit cards got too hectic, I just packed up and I left for London. When that got too hectic, I got a credit card in London, I packed up and I went to Trinidad, right? I went to the Bahamas. I just kept traveling until my body could just force me to be like, here you go. If I felt any kind of insecurities, I would just be like, oh, just go look for the next thing that will get me out of being with myself. So the opposite of the runaway archetype is, what is it called? The grounded explorer.
The grounded explorer.
Yeah. Is the golden archetype, which is the grounded explorer. This is when the runaway stops running outside. They start running internally. They start going within and start going into their bodies, start reckoning with themselves. They start exploring themselves, right? And the opposite of that, and the impact of that on your finances is that, I mean, as you can imagine, debt all over the place. And I'm sure you guys have seen this archetype. You know the archetype I'm describing, which is the nomad, the hippie. Everything is grand, you're always lovely. There's tons of movies on this archetype, right? They're so exciting, they're carefree, you're a carefree spirit. And it reflected in my bank account, right? I was so carefree, there was nothing, you know? Like, you're just living as and when. But with a grounded explorer, you are now able to get into your body. Start working with the body. You hold yourself accountable. So one of the things that I had to do when I started working and healing and moving into the golden archetype, into my golden archetype of the grounded explorer, was that I had to start, I made a list of all the people I owed. I called absolutely everyone. I paid every single credit card in every country that I owed. I called every single financial institution. I negotiated. I just started doing things. When things get challenging, I stay. Mizo has seen me. We have another business together, and I am staying, right? Through the challenges, I show up. Even when I want to run away, I show up every day. Because I understand that part of the karmic mission, and I talk about that in the book, the karmic mission of each and every profile, is that the karmic mission is that I have to stay as the runaway, right? You don't get to run away. You don't get to run away anymore. You get to stay. You get to be grounded. You keep doing things, right? So what I've seen with that is I went from $60,000 in debt, and I've already shared how I was accumulating this debt, right? Across countries, sorry, I'm spitting, across countries, across everywhere. And I had to then go back and really work on that debt. But the other thing is, I never ever stayed in jobs. I never ever stayed in companies. I'm still not a person that can work for someone, which is great because of the destroyer archetype. It makes it very challenging to work for someone. And I talk about that most destroyers will find themselves challenged to stay in jobs, right? And there's many reasons for that. But I can stay in my companies no matter what is happening. I can keep going. And because of that, I've been able to do things. I've been able to buy properties. I've been able to build a business that makes over $100,000 a year. I've been able to hire a team, who's one of the people on my team. Right? I've been able to build systems in place. I've been able to do things in my business, and that has enabled me to start making money, to start growing income. But I had to work with my core wounds. And one of the core wounds of the runaway is you do not feel safe in your body, which is why you're constantly escaping your body. You're constantly needing to leave your body. Now, I will say, please remember that the runaway is not about travel. Most people are running away through parties. I talk a lot about that. You're always the life of the party. You're always at the next party, the next event, everywhere, right? So that is also a sign of the runaway archetype. You're using substances a lot. That's also a sign of the runaway archetype. You cannot be in the body. You cannot stay in your body. You cannot be with yourself.
She doesn't own a car. We will pick her up wherever. If you are in Mpumalanga, she will know the next bus stop where you will pick her up. She is hands-on. She is the trusted. But Mangwata, no, everything is gonna be fine. Who needs to cut up the spinach? She's in everybody's event. I tell you, people in our family, they sit around and they're like, I know, somebody from Deep Cliff is coming. Don't worry, Auntie Who is coming, right? She is the sweetest person, right? She's the sweetest person. It's easy to do things for her because we love her and she contributes in the family that way. So I agree with you that every archetype has got a role. My heartbreak is, when does she do for herself? How does she even accumulate wealth? How does it affect her savings? Why must she be like that? And can she heal, by the way? Yes. Can she go to become something else? Because she's everything to everybody. She scrubs everybody's shoes and God, I can't stand it.
I'm sure you get along just fine with her.
She's
as a
my
fixer.
love. She knows, because me and her, right? So she'll turn up. She knows the trusted niece that will pick her up. The trusted niece who has got money for bus fare for her is me, right?
Yeah.
So we're never in conflict, she and I.
You will never be in conflict. She's the sweet one, you are the fixer. The perfect combination, the nightmare of the destroyer, by the way. The two combinations is like, oh my God, please help. So the sweet one archetype that you've just described is exactly this. They are the people pleaser. If you guys got that, right? So you will, if you are the sweet one or you know the sweet one archetype, they will do for everyone at the expense of themselves, always, you know? And the sad thing with the sweet one is their core wound is the wound of not good enough and perfectionism, but it's also the wound they need so much validation from the people that love them. Right? And because they need all that validation, they are constantly doing and giving and giving and giving at the expense of themselves. If you know a sweet one or you are the sweet one and you're struggling with womb issues and you're a woman and you're struggling with womb issues, this is one of the core reasons, right? Because there are no boundaries. The sweet one has absolutely no boundaries. And here's the thing, the sweet one will hold themselves back energetically in order to get the approval of the family, right? They'll sometimes never ever move out of the neighborhood, which I talk about in the book, the neighborhood that they grew up in. They'll have a lot of friends, they'll be reliable, everything. The role of the sweet one is to be the glue in the family. Without the sweet one, events in the family probably will not happen. Just like you said, there would be nothing because they would be left with the fixer. And the minute you come in, you start dictating. Right? You're like, do this, do that, do this. Like, why is everyone sitting around? The sweet one, very gently, let's do. You know, they get everybody moving, they galvanize the family, they have hands, they singing as they chopping the veggies. It's nice, right? So that's why they work with the fixer very well. But part of why she's not able to move forward financially is because she hasn't given herself permission to leave the family behind and to be okay with the family criticizing her, not having the validation of the family. The sweet one overly relies on the validation of the family, and I talk about this in the book, how it impacts their ability to make money is that they energetically hold themselves back from making money, because they need everybody to like them. Why? Because they've seen what happens to the fixer when the fixer makes money. And they don't have the boundaries that the fixer has. So when they do make a lot of money, they end up giving a lot of it to family members. Not only that, they get taken advantage of. People move into their homes yes, I can support so-and-so, I can look after so-and-so. Then they're adopting a child down the road. Trust me, the adoption, I have seen it in my family, okay? It's like, then they buying school uniforms for everyone on the street, something I've seen in my own family, you know? It's just, that's the way that they are, without the boundaries. Why? And also the biggest fear they have is that people will treat them like they treat the fixer, and then they'd have to go into conflict in the way that the fixer goes into conflict. In the book, I explain exercises that the sweet one can do so that they can move into their golden shadow state. So every single shadow archetype has a golden shadow, has a golden archetype, where I talk about how you can move into your golden archetype state, and that is the boundaried one. And how do you do that? And what are ways in which you can set your boundaries in a way that is not setting boundaries that in a way that the fixer does, you know? I've worked with clients to help them do that, and it really, really does work. Because if Mizo had to tell a sweet one to set boundaries, Mizo would just be like, "Hey, Wena, leave me alone, it's my money, you can't tell me anything," you know? For your aunt, if she had to do that, Mizo, she would be traumatized at a physical level. She'd feel so bad, she'd feel guilty, all sorts of things, and a lot of that is her, oh my God, they are now going to hate me. Whereas to you, That's like not a thing for you. That's not important to you. What is important to you is people become financially stable. You are focused on that. She is focused on people have to be comfortable, physically safe, emotionally happy, emotionally safe, and that is also important. Both the roles are key. So that's what I talk about in the book. And
so upsetting.
can I say, like, the fixer and the sweet one work very, very well together. Like, if a fixer can have a sweet one counterpart, match made in heaven. So much gets done because the fixer dictates to the sweet one, and the sweet one goes and gets it done and tells them how they should get it done. Okay.
At the Apartheid Museum, I thought it was the Apartheid Museum that affected me, but we spoke about money and we spoke about everything that my archetype does. I left the Apartheid Museum with a migraine. I ended up at Flora Clinic, and the neurologist did everything there was to do, including telling me to stop drinking red wine. But what he did was he had a conversation. He came to my bed at 8 p.m. after he had done his rounds, and he looked at these CT scans and lumbar puncture, and she was like, "Doc, there's nothing wrong with you, but you know." And he's Greek. He's got this long papadopoulos something. And he says, "There's nothing wrong with you. Tell me what happened on Saturday when the headache started. Did you wake up with a headache? Did it get and escalate?" And I described what had happened there. And I remember I didn't have you on WhatsApp at that time, but I did write on the Facebook page that I have this headache that's not going away. Just describe to the audience about what was that in my body that was going on from the conversation we were having about money, and what is this thing of getting into your body? What does that even mean to someone who's never gotten into their body?
That's actually such a great question. I've never thought of that. But so I have this thing where I say, like, the body never lies, right? So often what we are not aware of, right? It's the same as the panic attacks. What happened to me, right? With the headache, it's that the body communicates before the mind does, and before even our emotions do. So what often happens to most of us is we're hearing something, and then it affects us in our bodies, and we're not even sure what's happening. Then we feel a particular emotion, right? And then a thought may come up that is linked to that emotion, linked to what's happening in the body. But sometimes we create a story about why we are feeling the way that we're feeling. So we have to be extremely careful when dealing with the mind, because the mind is trying to make sense of what is happening. And so you may end up creating a story as to, this is why I'm feeling this way, right? So all that happened on that day is your body was triggered, and something happened in your nervous system, and the way that you hold tension, or maybe there's a memory around money that is associated with headaches. And because I know you, I know that like a lot of your money stuff is headache driven, right? So most of us will have a particular way or place where we store trauma, or we store memories, store thoughts in the body. And then when we're dealing with money, or whenever we're having that particular topic around money, be it relationships, be it anything, those parts of our bodies will then be triggered, and then we will feel a particular way physically, right? So Lisa then had that reaction, that physical reaction with the headache. But for different people, it could be anything. So as for how you get into your body, you literally just sit with your body. You start to notice the sensations in your body. If you want to get into your body where money is concerned, I've got a very simple exercise. I think I described it in the book, actually. Sitting with your bank account. Oh, Lauren is nodding. Yes, I do. So I describe different ways to get into your body in the book, right? But one of the exercises that I talk about is an exercise I teach in one of my courses, the Fall in Love with Your Bank Account Challenge course. And it's about looking at your bank account for just 5 minutes a day. Observe your breathing for 5 minutes. Set an alarm, observe your breathing for 5 minutes, and then set your alarm again, and then observe the sensations in your body. You're not trying to change anything. There's nothing wrong, there's nothing right. And this is one of the key things that I cannot stress enough. Most people tend to think, oh, if I'm having a great sensation in my body, then everything is great. If I'm having a bad sensation, then it's bad. No, it is just what it is. Your body is giving you a message, and if you sit with that sensation long enough, it will eventually reveal to you the emotions that are stored in that particular body part, or it will reveal to you the stories that you're holding in that particular body part, or it may even reveal to you some past life memories that you are carrying. Because we're not just working with this lifetime, and the body carries all of that from previous lifetimes. So yeah.
Allostatic load. Would you say that is what it was? What is the allostatic load? Someone is going to come across this big term in the book, and it can almost dissuade you from continuing to read the book because it is so loaded. Yeah.
It's loaded only because I unpack it so deeply and talk about systemic oppression and how that is linked to our allostatic load. So the best way to explain the allostatic load is to say, you know what, we all have a full stop. So when we're talking to each other and we're like, I've reached my full stop, we really do have that, you know? And we are all born with a different capacity to handle situations. How many of us look at our siblings or our aunts, uncles, parents, and we go like, but you went through this trauma and I went through this trauma and it broke you and it didn't break me. Why is that? That is the allostatic load, right? It means that whatever I am experiencing could be too overwhelming for my nervous system. We could both go to a restaurant, get bad service, and I can be chilled and be like, oh, this is terrible service, whatever, I'm not coming back. Mizo can go and she can have a fit and just completely blow up. Why? Because her allostatic load is very, very high, right? So that means that she is already at capacity, right? The best way to explain allostatic load is I use this example of, imagine you've gone through, you are in a factory and you have a maze machine. Now imagine your body is the maze machine, right? You keep putting maze every single day in that machine. You never ever service it. You never have a full stop. Every day, 24/7, that machine is running. We all agree that within a matter of months, that machine is going to break and never be able to keep going, right? Now imagine you, so that's the allostatic load, right? All the drama that the machine is experiencing and its inability to keep moving forward. Now imagine that machine every 4 hours has downtime, is serviced, is given time. We can agree that that machine can probably last for decades, right? We understand that. Now as human beings, and in particular as Black people, in particular as Black women, we go out, we come home, there's drama that we deal with in the household. We're now having to process that. We remember we are that machine that's processing the maze. We're processing the events in the household. We go out, we experience racism, we experience sexism, we're having to process that. You go to the shop, someone treats you some kind of way because you're Black and a woman, you're having to process that. You go to the office, you're dealing with microaggressions, you're having to process that. Your allostatic load is almost at zero. It's short. You know, by the time we're in our 20s, we're walking around and everybody's like, you're angry, you're intolerable, you can't deal with anything, you're so short-tempered, you're in your masculine, all sorts of things. Why? We have no capacity to process anything. Every other event, we are like that machine. We are getting stuck. Every time you put the maze in, it just gets stuck and you need to push it and do something. That's our allostatic load, which is where the key part of healing comes in, right? Because now we are giving birth to the next generation with that kind of allostatic load, right? So whatever our children do, this is why we're so quick to be like, hey, I'm going to clap back. I'm going to shout at you, I'm going to scream at you. We don't have the time energy and even capacity to process. So trauma isn't just the big things that are happening. It's the small everyday things. It's the microaggressions. It's the look your mother is giving you. It's the look or the way your husband is answering you that you now have to do emotional labor for and process, and it's a lot. You're continuously processing. So what I talk about a lot in this book is the need to heal, the need for self-care, the need that we need to take time out just for ourselves, because this is a lot. And then now, with that same allostatic load that we have, all the other dramas add money. And then we expect to be good with money, to be able to have the mental space and capacity to sit down and process investments. Now your aunt is calling you, if you are the fixer, your aunt is calling you, can I please have money for this? All that. We're all erupting and responding to trauma in different ways, right? The RunAway then goes, this is too much for me, I'm leaving home. You know, especially within Black families, because there's just so much happening there, right? And we're not just talking about the trauma of the family, we're talking about how systemic trauma impacts us, and then how we come and interact within our families and breed more trauma within our families, right? So this is having an impact on us and the next generation. By the time, it's no wonder that by the time, I talk about this in the book, by the time I was 14, I was already depressed and in therapy. You know, as a Black woman, you're carrying all that. And that's not even, and I haven't even talked about the ancestral trauma that we carry. So this is why we also were having more and more of this younger generation that is unable to process things that are happening to them, because they are carrying the ancestral trauma that our ancestors haven't processed, that we didn't process, right? And now they are coming in and having to process that trauma and process life.
The book is a lot. It's got shadow archetypes, and then there is hope though at the end. There is the golden side of each archetype, and each archetype doesn't just stand still. If it embarks on a healing journey, it gets to its golden side of the archetype. We unfortunately cannot unpack each and every one, but I had prepared something and have had to abandon it because Vangile evokes me like that. We went into our own personal archetypes. I hope you've learned some. So when you read the book, when you find yourself nauseous or you get a headache, do remember that I warned you, right? I warned you, and I warned you because there is a healing, there is a way, and there are practical steps. There are practical steps in the book that help you process and get into a way of doing that. So Vangile, from me personally, thank you for writing the book. Thank you for describing me as I am, and my big takeout of it is honoring other people's boundaries, even when they are faltering, even when they are effing up their own lives. Even when they are effing up their own lives, because I am interfering with their soul contract of doing what they came here to do. So you're going to find yourself in there. I promise you, you're going to find your exact example of yourself. But not only that, then went and did interviews on each and every one of the archetypes. These are real exercises, and yes, the fixer in there is myself. I'm called something else. But yeah, so when you read it, you are reading me personally.
You're the sovereign one.
I'm the sovereign one. So I've gone on to my golden archetype. And the fact of healing is not a straight one. Just talk about that as we close off then. Because it's not like, oh yeah, I'm this sovereign, wonderful person that's sitting here.
Yeah. No, guys, it's not, hey? Like, healing is a journey. And just like with every other journey, it's curving, it's all like you're getting on detours, you're going one way, you're going in a whole different direction. So there's no one way to heal, right? So the book is just giving you some guidelines, but definitely go deeper, and you'll start to notice yourself. You may catch yourself on some days where you're like, I'm the sovereign one, but someone is doing something so ridiculous that as a fixer you just have to step in and just be like, no, I don't care about this golden archetype thing. If I don't go ham on this is a travesty, right? And that's normal. This is called being human. The golden archetypes themselves, you're not meant to stay in the golden archetype. Being in your shadow state also has a role, you know? If destroyers always stayed in the renovator state, which is their golden archetype state, then there would be no one out here doing activism, triggering us, breaking down entire systems. You need that. But if all destroyers did was destroy systems, who's going to fix and build everything? This is why we need fixers who then come in and go, okay, I hear you. And then we also need the sweet one archetype who will go, we've heard you, destroyer, you are destroying everything, but we need a conflict resolution. We can't stay in war, you know? So everyone in every single one of these archetypes has a role to play in the family. And I can't stress that enough. I stress that in the book, that everyone has to be on it, because there are very specific roles that if you do not have one archetype in the family, it starts to show in the long run in the family. And if one archetype is shut down and not on it, then it also starts to impact our ability to build generational wealth.
I actually have so many questions, but I'll ask one. And I was curious about, because I think you touched on many things, particularly structures and things, and I was curious about the bringing along of the family, because you touch both on bringing along and kind of being comfortable with leaving the family. And if you think about the structures that we live under that are capitalistic and encourage like individualism, right? Western ways say you the individual, sort yourself out, and then African approaches say come along with others. Like, how do we strike that balance?
Oh, that's a lovely question. Chapter 18 of the book. I don't know if you've read the book. Listen. Yes, so chapter 18 of the book, I talk about ancestral wisdom, and I interview my father in that chain. Only told him about this lunch yesterday. In my defense, my brother got married last weekend, and we've had like so much, he's had so much prep for running that and doing everything that I actually completely forgot to remind him. But in the book, I interview my dad, and I shared that one of the things that I've seen that has been really incredible. In my paternal family, I've never had to experience black tats. I don't know what it's like to be called for, please help with the funeral, please help with the wedding, please help with anything, you know. And part of that is they started the Lihotla, right, which is a petty thing, which is just you come together as a group, and it's almost like family stockpile that they started, and they formalized almost their own funeral clientele. I don't know if I can say the brand, but their own funeral policies, you know. And they got together 80 different families in my extended family, brothers, cousins, aunts, uncles. So each family came with a representative, 80 family members, and they started their own Lihotla, where they have class A, class B, class C, and you can invest. You invest every single month. They have a treasury, they have a deputy chairperson, they've got a chairperson. He outlines it in the book as to how they did it as a family, and then they work together so that like every time you contribute money every month, whenever there's a family member that has passed on or an elderly family member that needs help in some way, you take from the Lihotla. So they've accumulated quite a bit, and now the next generation, my generation, so my brothers and my cousins are now involved in that. What they did was they started mentoring the next generation. Not only that, but all the professionals. If you are a family member that say, he talks in the book about how if you want, there's one of my nephews who is becoming a doctor, right? And he is being mentored by one of my cousins and taken around and has been told what to study. He's been given opportunities in the medical field, but that's what they've been doing since 1984, right? So you come through and you get mentoring and you're trained, and the next generation is taught how to run this lekgotla. So the next generation, what they are looking at is, yes, you guys did the burial fund, you did all these things so that we can help elderly members, we can chip in when there are things that are needed and we take from that capital. But what if we start now taking that money and forming a family trust and then investing and forming an investment fund? So this is not just them, there are ways that are unique to us culturally. So in the book I share that part of the issue that we are encountering as Black people is that we are approaching money from a Western individualistic standpoint. This is what is holding us back from creating generational wealth. I have seen another way that has been done, and that is not saying no to the West, because people are getting their careers, they are going to university, they're doing all that, but then taking it and marrying it with the African way, doing the lekgotla, having the meetings. They start my dad explained that every single meeting they start by explaining how each of them are related. They talk about is Nanazelo or is Tagazelo Zabo. They bring each other together, they slaughter an ox, they do all those things. You're paying homage to where you come from, you know? So we need to look at what have our families done to get us here. Because the ideas that we have is that the West knows best about generational wealth. That is not true. That is absolutely not true. We have our own ways of doing things. How do we marry them? How do we modernize them? How do we set up systems that are modern? Each and every family has something, but we are abandoning it because we believe that the financial advisors know best. You know, that there's only one way to build wealth, and there isn't.
Thank you, Ben.
I think, like everyone, I do have a lot of questions. I'll try and complete. Context. So as you were speaking, you spoke about...
Can you hear?
Can you put the mic closer to your mouth?
Yeah, to your mouth.
Okay, is this better? Okay. So I was saying, as you were speaking, you spoke about, you know, the influence of ancestral history as well as your environment, right? So I was wondering how much of your archetype is a function of how you were born, or, you know, your genetic makeup versus how you were raised? And are you ever just one archetype, or do you switch between, you know?
So starting out on the Black archetypes, I'm hoping I explained that we've had a lot of Western archetypes, but I'm hoping that there are more money archetypes that will not be further than me, but that there are other people that read the book and go, you know what? There are other archetypes that Vangile doesn't have, and I'd like to write more books on that, right? That this does not become that these are not the only archetypes. So that's the first thing that answers the question, right? So you can be more than one archetype. You tend to have a primary archetype and a secondary archetype from what I've seen. But you will not often be you won't be all of them. People are saying like, oh, but I'm all of them. No, because if you are a fixer, chances are maybe you may have a secondary archetype of the eternal child. You move maybe between the two, but you can't also be the runaway and, right? So, because each archetype is very unique in its own way. So that's the first thing. As for environment, yes, what I talk about in the book is that absolutely our responses to trauma is often shaped by environment. That I am reimagining, I am working from our trauma from 500 years ago. I do not know how we responded to trauma and to money pre-colonization, right? Pre-slavery. I don't have any of that information pre-apartheid. So now, unfortunately, I am working with where we are right now. I imagine that without any of these systemic issues, one of my, I think, authors or speakers says that actually slavery and colonization just interrupted African growth. They do not define us, they do not define African growth, they just interrupt, these events interrupted us, right? So I don't know what would have happened and how we would be responding to trauma and the archetypes we would have had we not been interrupted by patriarchy, by sexism, by slavery, colonization, globalization, all of those things.
Hi. I want to first say thank you for your work. I really do. There was a time, 2021, I can even tell you the exact date, and Lauren, who's turning around there, told me about you. And all I could afford, I mean, I had a cash flow problem, so let me be honest, right? All I could afford was to go online and do your meditation. And in 2 weeks, my cash flow situation started turning. So what Vangile does works. But I want to ask you a question. I used to run the cooperative bank development agency.
Okay.
And there was a South African young woman who learned about cooperatives in Italy. She was married to an Italian.
Yes.
And she came back and she was so convinced about how much financial cooperatives do.
Yes.
And she just kept running into mistrust. And we all know there's a culture of mistrust in this country.
Yes.
Yeah, we understand why. So if anywhere in your learning you can shed light on that, because what you're doing now around generational trauma really matters. However, in terms of the bigger turnaround that we need to do, overcoming whatever archetypes baggage we have around trust, I'm sure you agree matters.
Oh
Yeah.
man, me as well. Just like going now, not I am there. I'm there with her in the mistrust. So as someone who's working through that, I know we're working through that, both of us. So I think part of it is I've had to go, like the only thing that I can say is that I'm also working on this, right? I keep running into that myself, and I think part of it is because we are living in a country where we have often been told that you need to fake it till you make it, right? And so people present as though they have money stuff sorted, and we don't, how do I phrase this, but we don't actually give space for people to work through their stuff in a very public forum, to be like, you know what, I'm still working on this, but I don't have it sorted out financially. So what often happens is you find yourself getting into business dealings with people who have gone into the mindset that you need to fake it till you make it, and yet when the business dealings have to happen, and when we now need to do business and money is involved, their money trauma comes to the surface. And this is something that I can truly say I've seen very, very much in the last year, and so what then often happens is then people get into an I blew it mode, especially when lots of money is involved. And I don't truly believe that it's that people mean to be distrustful. Some people do, but I do believe that people believe that if I make more money and if I just give a particular story and the money comes, then everything will be sorted. Not understanding that the more money you make, the more of your trauma stuff is going to come to the surface, because money tends to highlight that. It tends to multiply that. So if she's running into that, all I can do is just give the advice that I'm dealing with and that I'm taking my own advice, is to sit with it and not take it as personally. You go back to the contracts, you work with the contracts, you work with the legal stuff, and you really focus on the legal stuff. I think the big thing that she needs to be aware of, that I think if I didn't have my own work, as you mentioned, is I would have given up. I would have given up and said, there's just no hope, there's no point. But now I'm also learning what kind of questions should I ask beforehand before I go into business with a person. What are some of the practical things I need to have on hand? What are the contracts that I need to have? What are the kind of legal people do we need to have in the room? I think that becomes really important. We're talking a lot here about trauma and money, but like in the book, I talk a lot about practical things. And I think we need to also work on the practical things. One of my biggest concerns is this belief that like if you think positively, then positive things will happen. And that's not how business works. You know, you need the practical, you need the energetic, you also need the mindset stuff, but the practical stuff is key. Put systems in place when you're in business. Get lawyers, get contracts signed, all of those things. Trust me, that has saved us. That has saved us so much.
And why I say that is because your emphasis on black women of color following. And I listen to you speak, and your themes are so universal. Like, you know, the gender thing actually, I think there should be more men. So my point is, what's your perspective or your approach? Because your message is universal. And a lot of men, myself included, actually, who I'm going to read the book now and take as much lessons as I possibly can from it. But I can think of my friends, my work colleagues, even some of my mentors who this type of conversation and the principles that you deliver or that you share are very meaningful and they touch all of us. So just explain your focus on women of color, the emphasis on that. And then secondly, going forward, can you open it up and make this available to everyone? Thanks.
The simple answer is yes. I never ever stop men from coming in my work, Chris. Christopher, firstly, let me just say I'm so sad that it took you coming to the book launch to decide to read the book. Right? But yeah, all jokes aside, yes, I am open to men. The reason why I say I target mainly black women is, guys, let's be honest. Most times, who are the people that are expected to pick up the slack in families? Who are the ones that are feeling the greatest pain? Their pain point comes mainly from black women often. And most often the eldest black daughter in the family, right? They are usually the ones that tend to be the fixers. They are the ones that are expected that when mom falls ill, dad falls ill, something happens in the family, that they become the caregivers, that they leave everything and they take over a caregiving, that they take over the finances. That's how things are, right? So this is why I'm targeting them. And also because I think that I am a black woman to begin with, right? So that is the audience that I feel like I resonate with most. But the other thing is that I think that most black women understand the trauma that comes from being black and a woman. We don't get a break in this world. You know, either you're dealing with the patriarchy or you're dealing with racism. So at some point, you have to deal with something. You know, you're coming home, you have the second shift, which I talk about in the book, right? So you need to know how to navigate that. So I think that's really, really important. And more often than not, it is us that are more worried about the next generation. We are worried about our children. We're worried about our grandchildren. So that's why I think I target black women, because I have seen the pain that they go through more than anyone else. It's not to say I don't see the pain of black men. I do. I resonate, I see it, but I see what it's like being in this world as a black woman, and that we need healing the most. Our allostatic load is on high, and nobody actually thinks, why are we so angry? Why are we going through all this? And nobody ever feels like our anger is justified. It's always that it needs to be changed. We need to do something about this anger. No. You know, this anger is completely justified. Anyone who is oppressed deserves to be angry and should actually be angry. You know? So this is why I target black women, to just make it okay to feel your feelings and to be you. There's nothing wrong with us. Look Child with an example of an eternal child. Okay. Okay, I probably also wrote the book for people dealing with the eternal child. So the eternal child is the adult that just never grew up. They never left home, or they moved out of home. They have a high profile job. They may even be a CEO, but somehow they can't pay their rent, they can't pay their bills, they can't budget, they can't do anything. If they have a child or children, someone has to end up helping them look after those children, right? They just never got to adult, right? And if you've dealt with the eternal child, you know how painful that is, right? And they need their parents, guys. Everything is about mom and dad, and you walk into a house and literally a 40-year-old will be having issues in the same way that a teenager had issues with their parents. Like they'll be having the same arguments as you had at 16 with your parents, and you're just like, so it's painful because at some point, especially in black families, we all have to step in to look after the eternal child. You want to, you don't want to, your money is going to go to them in some way. Even when you're screaming, if your money doesn't go to them to help your parents, they are going to have to help the eternal child. And you'll be screaming at the top of your voice, but this is a grown adult, they must go and get a job and do all these things, and yet they have to live at home, they have to live somewhere. So this is why it's so painful, because it feels like everybody else grew up and they never did. Now here's the thing, nobody wants to hear this, the eternal child may never grow up. I mean, we know, I've had eternal children in my family, right, that went to the grave never having held down a job, never having paid rent, never having bought groceries in the house, you know, never having been able to look after their child. When children were born, their parents had to take over, right? And that is just the way it is. And part of that, here's the thing, the eternal child can grow up if the family starts acknowledging the trauma where the eternal child is frozen. The eternal child has a very important role to play in the family. They play the role of highlighting to us the traumas we refuse to face within our families and that we refuse to deal with in our families. So until you are willing as a family to come together and face the traumas, the eternal child will have a hard time growing up. And more often than not, the only people, I won't say the only people, but the people that will help an eternal child grow, mom and dad. Failing mom and dad, grandmother, grandpa, failing that, aunt, uncle. If you are married to the eternal child, I don't know what to tell you, good luck, you know. Like literally there is, you will be mother until, you will be father until, you know. And it's just the way it is. You'll think that they are evolving, that they're changing, and then the next day they'll be like, sorry, I ate the money for rent, I went and I bought sneakers, you know. Like, you'll think you're getting somewhere, but that's because you're working with the child. This is where literally the child is in control. So the thing is, they need to go to therapy and they need copious amounts of inner child healing. Copious amounts of inner child healing. And I don't know, a lot of mother wound and father wound work, which I explain in the book as well. Thank you so much, Suella, for having us. Thank you. This was so beautiful. Thank you. So